Hello, and welcome to the Sacred Heart Shaman Podcast, where we talk about spiritual healing, shamanic wisdom, and the challenges of walking the healer's path. My name is Nadia Harenkiu, and today is episode number 13. What makes me a shaman, and what is shamanism? Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today. We are talking about the S word. This topic comes up so much in everything that I do, from meeting with new clients to trying to get my retreats listed on retreat websites, um, through people demanding that I justify the use of the word and clarify it. It's been a hard one for me to look at and accept on my spiritual path. So today we're going to talk about it because talking about uncomfortable things is what I do best. So I want to first talk about what makes me a shaman, why I use this label, and what shamanism is as I see it, because that's all I can share from. So we'll start with the label, the shaman word. So I use the word shaman because this is the word that the spirits have given me. Right when I had my kind of initiation process and I was struggling to call myself something, I was struggling to market or tell people about what I did, the spirits kept telling me, you are a shaman. You are a shaman. And I spent years in this kind of denial and imposter syndrome, not wanting to take on that word because there's such a what's how do I want to put this? People are very politically correct about it, and they think that if you use the word shaman, you have stolen it from somebody else. You have claimed something that is not yours, when simply it's a word to describe who I am and what I do. And it's pretty black and white, actually. You do not need another person to validate it for you. You do not need a certification or training in order to be one. In fact, if you have a certification and training, I would question whether or not you are a shaman. Um, and so, yeah, this is why I use the word. When I had my shamanic initiation, I felt like I was a sleeper agent that had been activated, that I had been pulled out because the phrase that came to me was because things weren't going as planned. Now, I don't know how I feel about that specifically at this point. I'm not sure if that's what I needed to hear in the moment or if that was a big picture view, but that's what I felt like happened. That's what the vibration of the awakening experience was. It was super brutal, super painful initiation. It felt like my psyche had broken open. And on the other side of that, I had to change everything about my entire life. The way that I operated, the work that I was doing, the work I had to do on myself. It was pretty startling experience. And the initiation is something that happens to a lot of people. And you can be initiated spontaneously or through ceremony or through illness or a near-death experience. But it is kind of a awakening moment that leads you down the shamanic path. You can have awakening moments as well, like just regular awakenings that will lead you down a spiritual path. But the shaman piece is very specific. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more deeply. So, shamanism, or to be a shaman, we'll start with to be a shaman, means that you are able to live in both worlds at the same time. So, we have this world that you can see in front of you. It's the 3D matrix, Earth paradigm. This is one world. And the other world is the world that you can't see with your naked eye. Sometimes you can, but in general, you can't. That is the other world. So this is where the plant spirits live and the land spirits, and energy exists in a more tangible way. This is where other beings exist. There's kind of it's not as black and white as saying, okay, there's this world, the earth, and the other worlds. There's actually many different pockets and dimensions, and I'm still finding places all the time where I'm like, oh, I didn't know that this existed, and it's off to the side between this place and that place. It's not linear. The whole otherworld thing is not linear. There's not just like a doorway to another place. There are many places, they're all connected to each other, but the primary point I want to make is that they are not physical, tangible 3D in the earth. And so being a shaman means that I always have one foot here in the 3D matrix and one foot in the other place. And hopefully, what that means exactly will be more clear after this podcast is done. Um, Now, in terms of like who you are on a spiritual level, straight up, you are a hybrid. It means that you are part human and you are part something else. And this is really cool with my clients because I can, after working with them, I often know like, oh, okay, you're like extraterrestrial, you're from this place, or oh no, you're a water being. Your true form looks kind of like a manatee, and you're half that and half human. For me, I don't want to like put a label on it per se, but I'm very much of the giant persuasion, like creators, destroyers, very big energy, very complex. Um, Obviously not from here because the giants created the earth. Um, so it's a very specific flavor of other world being. The giants are kind of in their own category, but they're definitely of the other world. And so that's part of the shaman piece is being hybrid and having one foot in both worlds at all times. Now, the other important piece to the shaman word is being of service to other people through using that gift. So I do think that there are some people who have access to the other world, but like it's not their role, it's not their job to bring information or healing back and forth. Or maybe their job is kind of limited, like they're a channel or they're a medium, very specific, like directed contact. They don't typically live and navigate both worlds all the time and bring stuff back and forth all the time. The shaman piece is like I don't specifically work with the dead. I don't do a lot of psychopomp work. I do it when it comes up, but I don't go seeking it out. But like I can see them. I can open the door. I can close the door. I'm more work with the bigger energies, like the land spirits and the giants and the fae and everything in between, the plants and the trees. And I have to kind of be planted in the other world. It's not a door that I can open and close. Like it is a part of me. I am the door, and it never opens or closes. And that's kind of an important distinction, I think. So in the shaman role, I'm constantly collaborating with the spirits and energies of literally everything. I'm always in a state of listening. I'm always in a state of relaying messages, of ceremony, of respect. It's just like an integrated part of who I am, and I would die without it, basically. Um, so yeah, there's that. Uh, One of my main jobs as a shaman is showing people who are meant to work and live in both worlds where they are stuck or unable to work in the world this way, whether it's trauma that needs to be healed or belief system that needs to be deconstructed or simply just like pointing it out. Like, hey, actually, you're also on the shamanic path. Let me tell you what that means and what that looks like, and I can help you navigate it. So a lot of times I'll meet people who know that they're very different than other people. Like their life has always been extra complicated. They've always been extra sensitive, extra deep. They know they have power, but they're like, whatever. Doesn't a lot of people, don't a lot of people have power? And not really realize that they're on the shamanic path until they start doing like training and mentorship and see that they have this huge untapped power that they were completely unaware. So not everyone is drawn to work as a shaman. Not everyone who is drawn to this path is a shaman. But shamanism as a practice, as a set of principles, awarenesses, beliefs, whatever you want to call them, it's not really religion in the way we think of religion. It's more like I I feel deeply that the world works like this. I feel that energy matters and that resonance is a thing and that everything has spirit. Bam, that's shamanism. It's not like a very specific set of beliefs. It's constantly very much in movement. It's fluid. It's ever changing depending on the dimensionality of our worlds. So it's not cut and dry at all. But if you are drawn to work as a shaman, it's a daily life thing. It's a life path, and it means you are constantly in a state of being like ripped apart and reborn and chiseled down. And here's how we learn how to trust the spirits more deeply. Um, the way that you eat, the way that you exist, where you live, everything is completely different from being like a regular person. And that's a really big part of the path. It's probably the hardest part of the path for sure. So some people are drawn to learn about shamans, work with a shaman, delve into shamanism because they need part of this understanding. They need part of the principles or concepts to integrate into their life, not because they're actually having the shamanic call as a shaman. So when people come to work with me, they may have a shamanic calling, which means they know that they are a shaman. They know that they have a deeper calling that they need to answer, and they're not really sure how, or they're not sure how to go through the initiation process if the spirits haven't initiated it for them. Um, they may need guidance or hone the skills that they already have and bring in more shamanic tendencies into their life. Or people are also called to work with me because they need a specific medicine that I carry in the shamanic thread. So, like a certain perspective, a certain kind of spiritual healing. Um, so, people are drawn to shamanism or shaman or to work with me for one of those two reasons. Either they have the calling, they need the training or the mentorship, or they need the medicine, whether it's a perspective or a literal medicine, to help them on their individual path. So again, I reiterate, shamanism is not about religion. It's basic earth 3D stuff. It is learning to work in the seen and the unseen, period. Um, Obviously, it's an extremely complicated thing, but the only belief required is that there is an unseen world. I think we've proven that. Like, day to day, everyone has stories that from childhood or even adulthood where they're like, questioning how much what we live in is 3D matrixy and what's actually real and what's actually out there. So that is the only belief that's required, is that there is some things that you can see and there are things that you cannot. It's not about having firm belief with how the world works. Period. I don't believe we have the capacity to understand how the world really works as human beings. So we can't, shamanism isn't about like, oh, this is how things work. No, again, the rules are always changing. The way that shamanism is kind of lived in the 3D experience is always changing because our dimension is always changing. So there's no firm belief, there's no firm rules other than there is an unseen world that you can interact with, and it does exist. As a shaman, I'm never trying to convince anyone of anything. That's not my job. I never want to convert anybody. I am simply sharing my way of life and what feels good and natural to me, and I'm here to share it if other people want to know. I'm not here to sell, not here to convince. I'm just here to share. I do not believe this work is for everyone, but I am compelled to share it for those who are called to learn it. So one thing that's been really hard for me on this journey, especially as I started working with plant medicine, and running like public events, is that this work is for sure not for everybody. In fact, a lot of people can't handle it. There are many people I work with who take years to come back around because of one thing that I said, and they're like, oh, it landed so deeply in me. And then it started growing, and then it started blossoming, and then it died, and then something new, like just these metaphors of that work was a lot deeper than I expected it to be. And it took me a long time to digest it and move through it and come back. And that's both in like regular shamanic work as well as the plant medicine part shamanic work. Um, it's it's not for everyone. And it's hard to discern, even for me sometimes, when a person is ready for this work and when they're not. It's something I actually have to be kind of careful with, or else we both end up frustrated. So I'm gonna just kind of go through like a list of talking points that I wanted to bring up around this topic. There's not like super it's not a super structured podcast. It's not like a paragraph or a chapter. I'm just gonna kind of go down my list and share my experience and my thoughts on the shaman thing. Several years ago, I worked with a Shipibo shaman, and one of the things he told, I kept having this phrase that was brought to me in spirit, and I was like, I don't know what this means. I don't speak this language. And he was like, oh, I speak this language. And I told him what it means, and he was like, it means you're the leader of the shamans. And I was like, what do I do with this information? I'm still very new. I don't even want to call myself the S word. Um, but he was like, yeah, you're the leader of the shamans. And he planted a seed. And maybe 5, 6 years later, I purchased a domain that's called Shamans of the West. And over the years, since that happened, I have come to realize that there are a lot of Americans who have been awakened to the shamanic path, where they have this like inkling, but then they have a lot of guilt and shame around using the word shaman because it's, they equate it with a certain people's or indigenous culture. And the truth is that medicine men and women are dying out in the old cultures, and they haven't been reborn, they haven't been reappointed, the younger generations are leaving. And so the shamans are not, I think historically, as I understand it, like a shaman was born into the tribe and it was kind of like recognized, like, oh, this is the shaman, this is the medicine person of the tribe. And that has stopped happening. I have been contacted by a number of people from different tribes around the country who are like, yeah, we don't have a medicine person anymore. Can you show me what you do? Can I meet with you? Unfortunately, there's always a barrier. They don't actually want to get to know me. They want to know what I do so they can copy it, which is really fascinating. But I have noticed that there are a lot of Americans or like quote unquote white people who have had the shamanic awakening because it's asking to come through different lineages and different lines. Um, and so over the years, I've seen that I have started leading other shamans. I have started training other shamans, and they're not the people we think um, they are not like pure of bloodline and culture and tradition because that's not what's needed in this world anymore. There is something else needed. So there's definitely like an awakening of shamans of the West. And a big part of what I do is lead lead that for people, like teach them and mentor them and train them. And that's been really cool because it's not, I talked about this in a different podcast. Shamanic training that I work with is very different than the structured trainings out there because I'm not working with a tradition. I'm working directly with the spirits, and the spirits tell me what's needed now and what an individual person needs to work on. The shamanic path is actually extremely personal, and the idea that we can go to a training program to do it is absolutely absurd. So that kind of gets more into what is shamanism. We're going to talk about that a little bit. So I can share what shamanism is to me. Again, I did talk about this a bit in the other podcast. I tried to go through some training programs and they were bullshit, quite frankly, living off of old principles and old paradigms and telling people to follow steps that like they're outdated in our current dimension. And our dimension is changing so fast that if you are not connected directly to the spirits and communicating directly, you're not getting the proper information and you're not actually doing the help that you are called to do. So I have dubbed this primordial shamanism because this is the way, right? Like thousands of years ago when people were practicing what we would call shamanism, you had direct contact with the spirits. There were not training programs that you went through to get certified to be a shaman. You learned to talk to the plants of that land. You learned to talk to the animals who were there that you were hunting. Um, and so it's old school shamanism, no tradition. There is no step 1 through 3. The spirits tell you what steps you need right now, and it just keeps coming. It keeps changing. It's not like you can just learn the basics. And the basics of shamanism is like journey work, divination, soul retrieval, psychopomp, etc. Um, you get taught what you need first if you don't get in the way. So like I think the foundation to shamanic practice is journey work. It is learning how to purposely cross over to the other side on your journey to integrate it so that you don't cross over, you just live there. But that's a different conversation. Journey work is intentionally crossing over to talk to guides. And this would be spirit guides, ancestors, power animals, angels, ascended masters. I mean, the list could go on. Honestly, you have an unlimited number of those things. You don't just have a handful of them. And shamanic journey work is the act of going back and forth and having those conversations. Now, I would consider that to be foundational to the practice, but the spirits might tell me that, like, no, you and I can't do journey work together. We're going to go through divination. And divination seems like small peanuts in comparison, but it's not. It's like a core practice in shamanism. Um, and if that's what you need to learn first, and we need to go head first into it, and we need to play in it, and we need to build your confidence that way, we need to build the relationship that way. That's how the spirits want to communicate. That's what we do. So there isn't like, oh, you have to do it in this sequence. It's very personalized, and that's the difference between the primordial shamanism approach and like a traditional shamanic training. When it comes to walking the shamanic path, it is an all or nothing path. You cannot walk it halfway. Once you accept the mission, you're open to everything. It never stops. Um, at least I don't think. I don't know. I don't feel like I ever have the ability to say no when it comes to my spiritual calling. Like maybe I could force it, but I'm pretty sure I would be the most miserable person in the world. Um, I think I have free will to the extent of like I can decide what I want to eat tomorrow morning and I'm going to pay the price or not, or be happy about it or feel guilt. But in terms of what I'm doing here as my life purpose, I don't have a say. I don't have a choice. And that feels good to me. It doesn't feel bad, but it is a truth that I had to accept a long time ago and that I encourage my mentors or my mentees and clients to accept as well. Like you're in or you're not, and it is an all in kind of path. And what that means is I'm deeply fulfilled, but it's very challenging, as you can imagine. Um, I cannot run from my own bullshit. I cannot run from myself because the spirits hold me accountable. And that's also like a huge shaman flag for me. Like when I'm working with people and I'm learning about people and I see them go through their process and their struggles and their shadow work and their wounds, I can see if they have spirits holding them accountable. And that is kind of the indicator like, oh, are you a shaman? Are you working with the spirits? Because when you are, they do not let you get away from anything. If you are not looking at certain parts of yourself that need to be looked at in order for you to be in integrity and a space of heart, love, work, they will bring it front and center and they will halt you from moving forward until you deal with it. As a shaman, I'm always going through a death and rebirth process. Always, always, always. It is exhausting. Anything that does not serve me and my like job here on earth, constantly falling away. So whether that is a job, a friendship, a relationship, a self-sabotaging behavior, clients, I mean, and people drop off constantly for the most bizarre reasons. And it took me a long time to get comfortable with this whole, I'm just in a constant state of death. Now, the plus side of that is that I get to bring death to people who need it. So if you have things that you need to let go of and we start working together, it just happens like automatically through our work together, which is kind of magical. Um, and make no mistake, we all have things we should have let go of long ago and are afraid to do so. I love, this is probably my favorite, is being shown how things need to heal, how to address wounds, how to help other people. That is like a huge piece of the shaman thing. Being able to see clearly things that other people can't see, and also how to heal those things. So I'll give you an example of like a personal experience that's happened to me about needing to face things that I'm not willing to look at. So I was in a relationship that didn't serve me. I couldn't see it at the time. I wasn't ready to see it. But I kept having this like deep urge to travel. So I would have these dreams about traveling to very specific places. I would go, and despite like conflict that it created in my relationship, I would go, and having that distance from my relationship helped me see it more clearly. And so every time I would go on a trip, I have huge spiritual experiences on the trips, but it would be very specific stuff around my relationship. Like, I would spend 5 nights crying and watching romantic movies and realizing that I didn't have the romance that I wanted, that I didn't have the love that I wanted, and having a space to really process that away from like the day-to-day stuff. Um, so it was an indirect facilitation of, okay, Nadia, we're going to start pulling you further and further away from this situation so that you can see it clearly. And then after doing that for a period of time, I started to see a lot of things clearly, like gaslighting. That was really startling the first time that I came home and I saw that, and I was like, whoa. I never would have seen that if I hadn't just taken 2.5 weeks away for like a reset of perspective, a reset of my life and my body. Um, and so the spirits are always working to support me in my movement forward, even if I'm not like in the moment making the connection, like, oh yeah, the spirits led me to Northern Ireland, which led me to having a heartbreak experience, which led me to come home and have this experience. Like my entire life is like that. It's listening to the messages and saying yes. And then there's more direct approaches that they take. Like 5 years ago, I was in Whole Foods in Portland, and I felt like I had drank ayahuasca, and immediately I was spinning, I was hallucinating, I felt like I was going to throw up, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. We went back to the house, and I sat down and I just leaned into it and I allowed it to take me over. And I kept getting this message that was like, let him go, let him go, let him go. And there was no context in the message. It was really strong. And I was like, at the time, the conclusion I jumped to was, oh, I have attachment issues. I need to let go. No, they were like literally, let him go. So the spirits are not always super clear, but they are always in support of and constantly moving us forward once we make that connection and establish rapport with them. So you literally can't be stagnant because they will push you to look at what you need to look at. They will push you to resolve what you need to resolve and keep you moving forward. So that's challenging. And at the same time, it keeps me fulfilled. It keeps me challenged. I'm the kind of person that constantly likes to be challenged and constantly likes to be learning. And this job is like being in school all the time. And the standard is always, the bar is always being set higher. So it keeps things interesting. It keeps me engaged. And I love that about it. So the last thing I want to talk about is on the day to day, what does shamanism look like? What does it look like for me? Again, that's all I can share. I do have a couple people that I work closely with who are definitely the same kind of shaman that I am. And I can tell you that there's a lot of consistency in how we operate and the struggles that we have. Um, so the first one is lots of mind management, like a ridiculous amount of mind management. And what that means is self coaching, getting coached, having a therapist, doing journaling, constantly looking at core beliefs, taking time every single day to do mind dumping, like making sure that my mind is kind of clean and kind of empty, and understanding what's happening behind the scenes in my own being so that I can do my job properly. The other thing it looks like is super sensitivity. I have a hard time, depending on the week, going to the mall, going to Walmart, going grocery shopping, seeing a movie in a movie theater, going to certain locations. Sometimes I'll walk in and be like, nope, there is no way I am going to step foot in this building. It feels gross in my body. Maybe I have somewhere that I need to be, and all of a sudden I am overtaken with some energy in my body, and I know that I shouldn't go to the place that I have scheduled to go to. Um, Eating can be hard, like the way food tastes, the way it sits in my body. So just a hypersensitivity to all things. for various reasons, and that comes and goes, for a period of time. I couldn't eat meat because I would feel the terror of the animal right before it was slaughtered every time I put meat in my mouth. That was a lot. And then other times, I crave beef and I eat it every day. So it comes and goes depending on what's happening in my life and what I need and what I'm tapping into, but there's definitely a really heightened level of sensitivity, and it does change the way that I operate in the world. On a day-to-day, it also looks like constant growth and wound healing. So I'm always reading 4 or 5 different books at the same time, always going through some kind of training, always doing my own inner work. And that I don't think will actually ever stop. I do have a really solid sense of self and worth, generally speaking. So it's not like out of a space of I need to be better. It's like, no, this is part of the job. Like we're just constantly learning, we're constantly shifting. Um, Friends and practitioners. So I have incredible friends that are all on a very similar shamanic path. I can't settle for friends that are anything less, and there are pros and cons to that. My practitioners need to be the highest level of practitioner. Like they really have to be in integrity with themselves. They have to be doing their own work. They have to be good at what they do. Um, and that can also be challenging, but also very awesome. You get to meet like the best of the best that way. I require an insane amount of downtime. I take a lot of time to recharge after certain events, and they're never the events I expect them to be. I need to go in the woods and talk to the plants pretty regularly, as well as like the rivers and the trees. Sometimes after ceremony, I can't get off the couch for 4 or 5 days. And one of my seer told me recently that it's because I literally dissolve after doing certain work. Like I'll take all this stuff that needs to be moved, and she's like, "You don't. It's not that you're doing it wrong. This is just part of you, who you are. Like it has to move through your body to exit this dimension, and it means that you need to go like dissolve." Okay. So sometimes I don't get off the couch for 5 days. Um, I have very weird abilities, which is part of the jam too, and I'm finding new abilities all the time, depending on like what I'm working with and what I'm tapping into. So my abilities are also so big that sometimes I need like weeks to prepare and recover from certain events because, let's say I work with someone who has like predatory energy that goes through their entire family tree. I have the ability to drain their entire family tree of this energy, and that takes a toll. Like there is an exchange of energy to do it. And so it might be like a couple days of recovery, but the ability is super cool, right? Um, Sometimes I go into the collective consciousness of an entity. So, like if I work with someone in the military and the collective consciousness energy needs to be drained, I can reach into it and start draining whatever needs to come out. And, cool, but also there is a recovery period for that because it's a big process. Um, the next thing is that I'm ultimately not in control of anything. And this is, again, I talked about this before, kind of just a way of life. I have to let spirit guide me, and I have to listen and I have to surrender. And, sometimes I get to be like, hey guys, this is what I want. And I get it, but it's not a lot. It's not a lot. So what this means, like practically speaking, is that I do move once every 5 years or so. I'm constantly being called to new places because there are places that need what I have, or they need my energy, or there's people that need help. So I do move frequently. I have another move on the horizon, and I don't even know where I'm going yet, but the spirits are telling me to get ready. So that's part of the calling. I have been homeless a few times, and I can't, like, I've never been super at risk, but I can never determine if it's because I haven't said yes fast enough. Like I hung on to something or I wasn't listening. I think part of it is not listening. Having a calling and then like not being all in and having like a grip on the old reality that I was supposed to let go of often puts me in bad situations, or not bad, but like lesson learning situations, if you will. I wouldn't really call being homeless in Hawaii a terrible thing. It was an incredible experience and I would do it again, but it happened. I'm constantly losing friendships, which can be really hard. People do come into my life a lot for specific lessons in medicine, or they have specific lessons in medicine for me, and then they drop off, often abruptly and like in a way that makes me feel like I did something wrong, but know that it was just time for the friendship to turn over. That death piece is really hard part of this work, where things are constantly being asked to die and be released. I'm also required to say yes to things that I don't know how I'm going to complete, um, because I just have the call to do it. Like, okay, this is the next thing I have to do in my work. I don't know how this is going to happen, but I have to say yes because this is the only door that's open. Occasionally, I do have psychosis skirting. So if I am going through a big expansion, I can feel the edges of my consciousness and the potential for psychosis. So it feels much like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Like I am reaching the edge of the universe of my mind. And if I make one more step, I'm going to lose it. And that happens maybe like twice a year when I'm going through a big expansion. And that's all it is. It's an expansion. It means that my barriers, my parameters are coming down. We're about to blow out. Um, it lasts maybe like 2 or 3 weeks at a time. I've never gone into a full psychosis, but I can definitely feel it at the edges. And it's part of expansion. It's just part of the deal. I do have the, I don't know, good, bad ability of zooming out, zooming in. So there's a lot of, in shamanic work, I think it would be considered like condor medicine or condor vision. Um, any bird you want to insert in there really, where you have the ability to like zoom really far out, and then you have the ability to zoom really far in. And living this path is like constantly going back and forth between the two and being able to see it clearly both for yourself and for others. Like, let's talk about the trajectory of the United States and what needs to happen, what's going to happen in 20, 30, 100 years. Let's zoom out big picture, and then we can zoom in micro and look at our life in the way that we're walking through it. Um, and see potential sticking points and guidance in both lenses. Um, and then on the shaman level, for me specifically, I work with death and creation. I work with demons and collective energies. So very, very big things, very, very powerful things. I'm not like, I mean, we could talk about spirit animals, but we're talking about ants versus elephants, in terms of like actual size comparison. So I tend to work with much bigger energies, and that's not the case with every shamanic practitioner. The primordial, like giant energy, the death and rebirth energy, the demons, like those things are very specialized in a lot of ways. But it's kind of an example of what kinds of things you would work with as a shaman. So the bottom line is that this path is not easy. And all the people that I know who have the shamanic calling would genuinely tell you that they would not have chosen it. It is a never-ending and far more challenging path than what average people go through. And yeah, it's something that I feel really passionate about sharing. This is why I created the podcast, is to help other people who are on the path, help give insights and advice and just share, right? The sharing piece is super huge in this work so that they know they're not alone, so that they have a better understanding. So people who are called to shamanism and don't know what it is can be like, testing it out a little bit, hearing about it, seeing what resonates and what doesn't. So thank you for listening about my shaman talk today. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to know more about me and my work, you can find me at www.sacredheartshaman.com.